everybody. Good day. And how are you today? I hope we all are good, right? Very good. My name is Gina Inatimi, and I'm going to be your mathematics teacher for today. I'm going to be your mathematics teacher for today. I hope we all are ready to learn mathematics, right? Are we ready to learn our mathematics? Okay, very good. Today we are going to be learning fraction. We are going to be learning what? Fraction. We are going to be learning fraction in mathematics, okay? Now, in this episode, we are going to know the meaning of fraction, what fraction is all about, the different types of fractions we have, okay? And what it means and what it also represents. Very good. Okay, let's move on. What is a fraction? A fraction is a number that represents a numerical value which defines the part of a whole. It does what? It defines the part of a whole. A fraction is a number that represents a numerical value which defines the part of a whole. What this means is that a fraction is a number that represents a part of a whole. It does what? Represents a part of a whole. A full object, it represents a part. It does what? It represents a part. That is what we mean by fractions. And we have two parts of fractions. We do what? Have two parts of fraction. We have the numerator and the denominator. We have the word the numerator and the denominator. Very good. We have the numerator and the denominator as the two parts of fraction. Now, what do we mean by the numerator? The numerator is the upper part of the fraction which represents the section of the fraction, the shaded part. The word, the shaded part. The word, the shaded part. Very good. The numerator is the upper part of the fraction which represents the section of the fraction that is shaded. That is what? Shaded. The upper part of a fraction, it represents the shaded part. That is what this means. Now, what do we mean by the denominator? What do we mean by the denominator? It is the lower part that represents the total parts in which the fraction is divided. Okay? It is the lower part or the bottom part that represents the total parts in which the fraction is divided. What this means is that the lower part of the lower part is called the denominator, and it means that the whole object, a whole object it represents the whole object before it's being divided. Okay, so the denominator is the lower part or the bottom part that represents the total parts in which the fraction is divided, the whole object in which the fraction is divided. I hope we understood this, right? Okay, did we understand? Okay, let's go again. What is a fraction? What is a fraction? A fraction is a number that represents a numerical value which defines the whole part of a object, which defines the word whole part of a object. Is a number that represents the part of a whole object. Okay, a full object, the shaded part, that is the number that is a fraction. When it's shaded, it's a fraction. And during this episode, we are going to be seeing different fractions and different objects that represent fraction. I told us that we have two parts of fractions, right? We have two parts of fractions. We have the numerator and the denominator. We have the word the numerator and the denominator. What did I mean by the numerator? It is the upper part of fraction that represents the section of fraction that is shaded. The shaded part, that is the numerator. The number that is there represents the shaded part of an object. So the numerator is the upper part of an object. Sorry, is the upper part of an fraction that represents the section of an object that is shaded. That is what? Shaded. So what do we mean by the denominator? The denominator is the lower part or the bottom part that represents the total parts in which the fraction is divided. That means the whole object, it represents the total parts of it. It does what? It represents the total parts of it. It does what? It represents the total parts of it. Okay, did we get that? Do we understand what we mean by fractions and the two parts of fractions we have? Okay, very good, very good. Now let's move on. We have some examples here that show us a fraction. We have three examples that shows us a fraction, and these examples are going to tell us the numerator and the denominator. They are going to what? Tell us about the numerator and the denominator. They are going to what? Tell us about the numerator and the denominator. Okay, very good. Now let's move on. Number one, 1/2. 1/2. 1/2. Okay, so it's a fraction. Now, which is the numerator and which is the denominator in 1/2? 1 is the numerator because we say the numerator represents the upper part, right? And 1 here is at the upper part, right? So 1 is the numerator and 2 is the denominator. And 2 is the what? Denominator, because it represents the lower part. It does what? It represents the lower part. So 1/2. 1/2. 1 there is the numerator and 2 there is the denominator. 1 is upper and 2 is lower. Okay, number 2 says 4/8. 4/8. So 4/8 is a fraction. Which of these number is the numerator and which of them is the denominator? Remember, we say the numerator is the upper part, right? And 4 is at the upper part, right? So 4 is the numerator and 8 is the denominator. And 8 is the word denominator. Very good. 8 is the word, 8 is the denominator, and 4 is the numerator, because 4 is at the upper part and 8 is at the lower part. Then 3 says 3/6. 3/6. Which is the numerator and which is the denominator? We say 3 is the numerator because it's at the upper part, right? Because it's what? At the upper part, right? Very good. And 6 is the denominator because it's at the lower part. Because it's at the what? Lower part. So we said 1/2 is a fraction. 1 there is the numerator and 2 is the denominator. Very good. Then 4/8 is a fraction. Then 4 there is the numerator and 8 there is the word called denominator. Very good. Then we say 3/6. 3 there is the word numerator and 6 there is the denominator. So I hope we have come to understand what the numerator is and the denominator. We say the numerator is the upper part of the shaded object, right? And the denominator is the lower part that represents the whole object. Okay, now let's move on. Now, these are the images of fraction and I'm going to explain them for you. Okay, the first image we have is the circle, and we can see that is shaded one part, right? It is shaded one part, right? Good. And that is called 1/2. It's called 1/2 because the circle is divided into two. Is what? Divided into two, and it's only one part that is shaded. That is what this one represents. Remember, we said the numerator represents the what? Shaded part. It represents the what? Shaded part. So the 1 there represents the shaded part of the first circle, and the 2 there represents the full circle because it's divided into 2. Is what? Divided into 2. It is what? Divided into 2. So that's why this fraction is called 1 over 2. One part is shaded and in the circle it is divided into 2. Do we understand that? The next one says 3 over 6 is what? 3 over 6 is what? 3 over 6. Now, why is it called 3 over 6? It is because the full circle is 6, right? It's divided into 6 parts. Is what? Divided into 6 parts, and 3 parts are shaded. Remember, we said the numerator is what? It represents the shaded part. It represents the word shaded part. It does what? It represents the shaded part. So this 3 over 6, the 3 represents the shaded part and the 6 represents the whole object because the circle is divided into 6. It is what? It is divided into 6. Do we understand? I hope we do understand, right? Now the next one, 4 over 8. 4 over 8. 4 over 8. Now, in the circle, arm is divided into 8 parts, right? And 4 parts are shaded. 4 parts are what? Shaded. So though the number 4 there represents the shaded part, right? Because we said the numerator represents the shaded part. That's why this part is called 4. And the denominator is called 8 because it represents the whole object. It does what? It represents the whole object that is divided into 8. Do we understand? Do we understand? Okay, very good. I'll take it one more time again. Number 1 says the circle there, it's 1 over 2, and we say that 1 represents the shaded part and 2 represents the full circle because we said the numerator represents what? The upper part that is shaded, and the denominator represents what? The whole object, which is divided into 2. Do we understand? I hope we understand. Good. And we said 3 over 6. What do we mean by 3 over 6? Because the object is divided into 6 and 3 parts are shaded. 3 parts are what? Shaded. 3 parts are shaded. And we say the numerator does what? It represents the shaded part, and the denominator does what? It represents the whole object. And if we count the circle, we will see that it is divided into 6. It is what? Divided into 6. Very good. Now the last one says 4 over 8. 4 over 8. 4 over 8. If we count inside the circle, we see that the circle is divided into 8. That's why the denominator is 8, because we say it represents the whole object. It does what? It represents the whole object or fraction. And we will count that 4 parts are shaded. 4 parts are shaded. 4 parts are what? Shaded. That's why the numerator is 4 and the denominator is 8. I hope we do understood. Sorry, I hope we did understand this exercise, right? And I hope we practice it more. Like I said from beginning, we'll learn about fractions and how they are divided, okay? And know which is the numerator and which is the denominator. So I hope we understood this exercise because it's also important in our mathematics. When we're learning about fraction, we need to know what a fraction is and know the meaning of the numerator and the meaning of the denominator. So I hope we practice this exercise more to gain more knowledge about it. Very good. Now we are going to be moving on. We are going to be moving on. Okay, so we are going to be moving over to the next one. We are going to be talking about the equivalent fraction. We are going to be talking about the word equivalent fraction. This is one type of fraction, okay? It's one of the types of fraction we have. Now, the equivalent fractions are fractions